Are we prepared to recognize that we're not at the top of the food chain potentially, that we're not the alpha predator, that we are uh, maybe somewhere in the middle?
The real question is, what happens when we realize we are not at the top of the food chain? What happens when we realize we are not the alpha species on this planet? Now, will that have an impact on our psyche?
What if there was knowledge, Kurt, that was so volatile, so earth shattering, that the mere knowledge of that getting out could predicate an action that could potentially threaten the entire species? Now, what do I mean by that? For just a moment, take off the scientific hat, take off your humanitarian hat, take off your philanthropic hat, and put on a hat of national security. Um, we just talked about the fact that there's no indication that these things have been here to help us. Okay, so there's really only three possibilities: they're benign, or if you will, benevolent, or two, they are malevolent, they're here to hurt us, or three, they're just here to observe us, and they're capable of doing both good and bad like us. Well, if you were to put on your national security hat for a second, let's say you're a general from the 1950s or 60s, and your job is to protect America and all things good and great, and the height of the Cold War, and you've got the Soviet bear across there, and things are pretty tough, right? And nuclear proliferation is a real thing. Now, you have information that there is something here that can outperform anything you have, and really anything you have is rather ineffective from a national security perspective. And there's a thing out there, and it doesn't show that it's being benevolent. So it's only one of two other options: either malevolent or it's like us. And we see this very careful ISR surveillance of our nuclear equities. It's interested in nuclear equities. Well, some may look at that as what we call preparation for the battlefield. Okay, and let's just say hypothetically, there's a 10% chance. U.S. has a 10% chance that these things are bad, or one day they're going to come here in force, and they're looking at us. Right? Remember, you're putting on your national security hat, so forget about everything else for a moment. Your job is to be paranoid, and there's a small remote chance that these things are not good. And maybe there is a plan for these things at some point to come in force in 50 years from now. And if the mere fact you have this conversation with the American people, what's going to happen? Well, the American people are going to start getting prepared. Well, I can tell you in real life combat situations, when we send in long range surveillance LURS teams, behind enemy lines, the moment the enemy finds out that we know, that they know we're there, the surprise element of surprise is over. And so ultimately, hypothetically, imagine a scenario where maybe we had 50 years to prepare for something, but now that the cat's out of the bag, that existential action will happen tomorrow. And by the way, we're not ready for it. We're not prepared for it. We don't have a countermeasure. We don't have a capability to counter this. And so from a very real perspective, a national security perspective, the mere fact that you are acknowledging the existence of something may predicate an action or an act that you're not prepared to have right now. And so I encourage you and your listeners to just for a moment, I'm not asking you to be a national security person, but I'm asking you to suspend your personal beliefs right now for just a moment and put yourself in somebody else's shoes who does feel that way, right? Now, what do? If the mere fact of talking about this could potentially cause a reaction that you're not ready for as a country, as a civilization, right? Maybe that's the reason why you decide to only brief certain presidents who have a background in intelligence. Maybe they were former directors of CIA, but the other presidents who are career politicians will be, they're here today, gone in 4 years. Maybe you can't even risk telling them. And so maybe the reason why this has been kept secret so long is actually, in a weird sense, some sort of sense of patriotism by people. And maybe that's how they justify it. And I'll leave that at that as a counterpoint of forcing people to think maybe a little bit non-traditionally. Now, do I think if that happened to ever be the case, that's a good explanation? No. I still think that we have to be honest with the American people. It's like I've said this before, it's like going to the doctor. Just because I have cancer, it's bad news. Don't keep that from me. I want to know, because maybe there's a chance I can do something about it, right? And so, but do I understand that mentality? Sure, nobody wants to give anybody bad news. Now, am I saying that's the case? No, I'm not. It's just, you asked me one of the reasons why people would want to keep this secret. Well, that's a really damn good reason why people may want to keep this secret, because the mere fact of not keeping it secret could cause a reaction that you're not ready for yet. There's nothing you can do. You don't have a countermeasure. So again, from a national security perspective, that makes sense. Again, I don't agree with it, but is it possible that whatever is out there has been here for a while and has had some sort of influence on our species? I think it's certainly conceivable. I think it's too early to tell one way or the other that is a substantiated fact. But there's historical records in religious texts going way back to including the Judeo-Christian faith system that these things have been around for a while. When I was at the Vatican, they some individuals there had provided some very compelling evidence to suggest that we've been dealing with this phenomenon for quite some time.
If you want to learn about what's out there, you first have to learn about what's in here. The way we process information, the way we interact with one another. Every individual is different, but we're also very similar in many ways. And we all look at things, certain things in commonality. If we all look at the sun, it hurts our eyes. But we don't all look at everything the same way. And this is a topic that's certainly in that category where a lot of people will look at it differently. It's not about vindication, folks. It's about truth. But this is a serious topic. You're asking people, and I'm sure Deb can tell you, we're asking people to challenge their very psyche, the very essence of what it means to be a human being, the way they were raised, culturally, religiously, politically, in every single way. You're saying, hey, listen, a lot of things you were told turns out may not be entirely accurate. So let's have a talk, shall we? We got to handle this responsibly. We got to have a delicate situation with people, like talking to kids about sex, right? I know it's uncomfortable. We don't want to do it, but it's better to hear it from us than to hear it from somebody that you don't want them to hear it from, or worse, experience it. So, it's important that we have this talk, and we have to police ourselves, and we have to hold ourselves now to a higher standard, because people are really looking. People are paying attention. Some people are excited. Some people are scared. Some people don't know what to think. And this is why every single one of you, and I'm sure Deb can probably jump in if she wants to on this, we have a big responsibility on our shoulders, and we have to really come together. Let us not put dominion over the creator or its creation. There's a lot of things that religion gets right, if we just learn to listen. And it doesn't matter what religion, really. And any way to get closer to that creator is probably okay. We are a very fragile species. We need guidance. I don't care who you are. We all need guidance. There are some very dark places in this world where I've seen true evil, and it's there and it exists. It's maybe it's the trials and tribulations for our species. I ultimately, end of the day, I don't think this topic at all compromises or challenges the notion of God in any way. In fact, if anything, I think it only emboldens our ability to expand maybe our own preconceived conceptions of what God may be. No different than when Galileo first proposed that the Earth was not the center of the solar system. And there were a lot of people who thought that was going to challenge at the time religion. Turns out that it didn't. And in fact, the same holds true in Judaism and even in Islam. There have been people along the way that have made observations of nature that were perceived initially to contradict the word of God. And only afterwards did we realize that it didn't. It actually reinforced the notion of this ultimate authority, if you will, this architect of the universe, and only increases our wonder. So thank you very much, Nathan. And I think theology has a very I think it has a seat at the table for this topic. I'm not sure we can have this conversation, frankly, without having some of our religious leaders part of this conversation.
What is their worry outside of them?
There have been, forbidden truths, we can call them, if you will. There have been forbidden truths in the history of not just our country, but many countries. Truths that could upset a balance that's been around for a long time. Imagine everything you've been taught, whether it's through Sunday school or through regular formal education in school, or what our political leaders have told us. And yes, even maybe our mothers and fathers around the dinner table have told us, or maybe at bedtime, about who we are, right? And our background and our past. What if all of that turned out to be not entirely accurate? In fact, the very history of our species, the meaning, what it means to be a human being and our place in this universe. What if all that is now in question? What if it turns out that a lot of the things that we thought were one way aren't? Are we prepared to have that honest question with ourselves? Are we prepared to recognize that we're not at the top of the food chain, potentially? That we're not the alpha predator, that we are maybe somewhere in the middle? It's interesting because I was having a discussion with a friend not too long ago. Really, we call them graybeards in the government. Really, really smart guy. I'm not going to mention his name, but I was talking to him probably a couple months ago. And this is a guy who was always paid to solve the hard problems for the U.S. government. Cold War. How do we solve that, right? How do we do these big things? How do we go in and beat the Russians at their own game? So this guy I respect tremendously. And we had a conversation. He said, Lou, mankind's been around for a little while. And for most of that time, mankind's been around. We've been smack in the middle of the food chain. We've been, we ate a lot of things, and a lot of things ate us. And that's just the bottom line. And about 70,000 years ago, something fundamentally changed. Something changed. And our species was instantly catapulted to the very top of our planet as far as predatory animals. And now all of a sudden, we became the most feared We were the most lethal and the most successful. And in fact, most of the large species that existed on this planet went extinct because of us. Believe it or not, because we started eating all of it. There were a couple species that did very, very well with our ascension, our immediate ascension, and we brought a couple species with us. The dog is an example, where the dog species benefited greatly with mankind's ascension as the alpha predator, and wound up succeeding as well, doing very well off of that. That changed the entire global landscape of our planet almost overnight. Large animals went extinct because of us. What if it turns out that there's another species that is even higher on that ladder than we are? Do we need the social institutions that we have today? Will we need governmental and religious organizations that we have today if it turns out that there is something else or someone else that is technologically more advanced and perhaps from an evolutionary perspective more advanced? Have we been wasting our time all this time, or are we doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing? Are we? Does it turn out that mankind is in fact just another animal in the zoo? Or because we thought ourselves as a zookeeper before, but maybe we're just another exhibit inside the zoo. What would that mean to us? So when I say sombering and sobering, I mean that there's going to come a point in this conversation where we're going to have to do a lot of reconciling with ourselves, whatever that means, from whatever philosophical background you have. This is going to impact every single one of us the same and yet equally and yet differently. And I think that's important. Do we find ourselves in a situation where history may have to be rewritten?
I've had an experience where I had a very senior person in the US government told me flat out, Lou, we want you to stop this program. And my response was, well, okay, sir, I can understand that, but can you give me the reason why? Because from our perspective, these things are absolutely real. We are seeing these, we're recording them, we've got the date on them. And the response back to me was, Lou, we're not arguing that they're real. We know they're real, but we don't think you know what they really are. And so at that point, I'm thinking, oh, maybe this is some sort of secret
Right.
U.S. kind of program that they didn't read me onto, which I'm fine with. And I said, well, okay, sir, that's fine. And his response back to me was, what you're dealing with are demonic beings. I really had to operate in the shadows more than ever. I was used to doing it because of my job, but I wasn't used to running operations, inside my own organization. But that's what we had to wind up doing because there were people that were certainly against this effort, and only because of again their philosophical belief system. I had nothing to do. In fact, I had one. I remember the conversation very well. This is a person I respected tremendously, very, very senior person. He's told me, he said, Lou, I want you to stop doing this. I said, okay, sir, I certainly can, but may I ask why? And he says, well, we already know what it is. Now, at that moment, I honestly thought maybe it was our own technology. I was running up against some super uber secret sap, and they were telling me to stop. And I said, okay, sir, so it's ours. And he said, no, that's not what I'm saying. And he said, he asked me point blank, have you read your Bible lately? And I wasn't quite sure where he was going with that. And I said, well, sir, I think I know what it says. Where are you going with this? And he said, well, then you would know that these things are demonic and we should not be pursuing them. Yeah. And he wasn't kidding. That's exactly how he felt.
So this is a Pentagon. This is a Department of Defense official saying, stop looking at UFOs because they're demonic.
Correct.
But if something demonic is flying over our skies, wouldn't religious people want to fight them?
Well, I think, look, I think no matter what it is, we need to figure it out. And, there was a time, and this is, look, I'm a religious person, but, there was a time where the church wouldn't even look through the telescope of Galileo because it conflicted with their narrative, only to, years later, them to come out and actually now, use the grandeur of the universe to support their philosophical and theological belief system. So I am under the presumption that more data is good, and I don't think we should ever be fearful of data. And it doesn't matter if they are, at the end of the day, some sort of super secret foreign adversarial technology that's leapfrogged us, or if it's little green men from Mars, or if it's demons. We probably need to figure it out because it's in our airspace. And by the way, it doesn't care if what we think, because it's there and it's interacting with not even that's just our military, but even civilian aircraft and civilians.
Were top secret briefing slides. Well, in the United States, where I now live, the definition of top secret information is information the release of which would cause catastrophic damage to the national interests of the United States. I think I'm slightly muddling the British and the American definitions there. I can't help that, but yeah, cause serious harm to the defense and national security of the United States. And you've got to say, what could there be? For years, people forget, for years, the American government told people, we're not even interested in this. Nobody's investigating. And now it's like a 180-degree turn. And they say, yeah, we've got top secret information on UFOs. So like you say, what is it?
Because this topic's really scary. It's like, UFOs, oh, wow, there's these things in the sky. Well, it's much bigger than that. It's much, 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 much bigger than that.
Tom, why is there stigma
because
on even the topic of ufology, even though there's science involved? And that's what you're not dealing with this from a fantasy perspective.
No.
You're dealing from a facts perspective. Yet still people hear Tom DeLonge and UFO, or anybody in UFO,
Sure.
and they think tinfoil hats. Why?
Because what happened is when we found out what was going on after World War II, kind of during World War II, it scared the hell out of everybody involved. And so what they did was they said, we got to figure out what this subject is, what this topic is. We got to figure out what it is, who it is, what they're doing, all that kind of stuff. And we need to do it in crazy secrecy because this is really, really, really advanced stuff.
And what was the really, really advanced stuff?
Well, the machinery,
Which is what?
The crafts itself.
Aircrafts.
Well, they're not even really air. They're transmedium, so you have this sphere.
Okay, now I'm just going to say it's this point right here where everybody goes, Tom's crazy.
Yeah, well.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Not me.
No, I'm just saying it feels like.
hanging on every word.
Oh my God, I have no idea.
Well, let me explain why
Okay.
why it's the tinfoil hat thing. Is so what they did is the government slipped operatives, over decades into these UFO groups and into the news and just made everyone think it was dumb. But it was for good reason, because they didn't want people to understand it was real. They didn't want people freaking out. They didn't want Congress freaking out. And eventually what that would have done is exposed what they were trying to do, which was really a crash course on understanding what this was.
What the hell was it?
So just keep everyone thinking it's stupid. That way it doesn't boil up before they're ready to talk.
Do we
about
have
it.
an alien ship of some type?
Oh, I no comment on that.
What do you
Just-
know, Tom?
Oh, there's a lot
Just
of
shake
things
your
I'm
head
not-
yes or no. This is radio.
I'm
so.
not gonna
He's shaking his head. Oh,
I'm
he's
on
not.
camera.
I mean, there's that, but yeah, sure.
Have you ever encountered an alien?
No, but I've had some really interesting experiences. Yeah.
Do you believe, as I do, there could be an alien in this room right now?
There might be.
When you really find out what's going on and what's happening on Earth, it's very depressing, and it totally fits with biblical prophecy, because it appears that both gray aliens and reptilians are feeding on human bodies. That's one of the things that you learn. We need to get rid of these human traffickers. We need to get these aliens out of here, because they are demons, and it's worse than you think. It's a lot worse than you think. What's going on with the border? Most of those people are not going to become American citizens. That's what they call a meat wagon. And I heard about meat wagons all the way back in 2010, that they let people through the border, they put them on a bus, they drive them into an underground base, and whatever happens from there.